What's going on, guys? We are back here with another episode of Watching the Meta, the weekly series where we take a look at the Magic Online challenges over the weekend for Modern, Pioneer, and Standard. We take a look and see what everybody played, see what the metagame looked like, notice if there's any trends in terms of what the metagame looks like last week compared to what it looks like this week. And then at the very end of each segment, we take a look and see if we can find some interesting and spicy deck lists amongst the top 32. But before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor, Cool Stuff Inc. If you're looking to purchase Magic the Gathering singles, sleeves, sealed product, or deck boxes, whatever your heart desires, be sure to head over to CoolStuffInc.com, use promo code DOOM at checkout to get 5% off of your next order and this exclusive Rhino token while supplies last. Cool Stuff Inc. They got cool stuff, and they got it in stock. And with that out of the way, let us kick things off, as we always do, with Modern. And Modern, it's Modern. Looks great. I don't know what else to say. I keep saying this every single week. Look at the graph. I mean, if you want to talk about a balanced and diverse metagame, I don't know if it gets any better than Modern. Boros Energy was, it was creeping up a little bit last week to 18.3%. Back down this week to 12.1%. Mono Blue Belcher, 10.7. Eldrazi-tron, 9.8. You got Esper Blink, 6.7. All of these numbers are relatively the same from last week. No big changes there. Esper Goryo's Affinity, Bird Scale, Amulet, like all of these, nothing is changing too much. It just basically I think the 6% of people that stopped playing Boros, those were sort of dispersed evenly amongst all of the other decks. Is it prowess? I will mention basically non-existent last week, 4.9% this week. So a relatively big jump there. But other than that big jump in prowess, not really a ton else. Gruul Eldrazi, 4.5% as well. Not, super, it really wasn't existent last week. But yeah, I mean, Modern looks great. If you are interested in playing a format where you can basically play one of 15 decks and have a legitimate chance of winning a tournament, I think Modern's a great format. You look at the challenge winners, 6 different decks and 7 challenges. It doesn't get any better than that. So we've seen the winners and we've seen what the metagame looks like. Let's go ahead and see if we can find some spice. And before we continue, I just want to say huge shout out to my editor who has created this deck viewing feature basically just by himself out of thin air. We've been making some changes and making some new additions and trying some interesting things out. So big shout out to the editor, Ryan. Just amazing work on this deck viewer. And the first deck list we're going to take a look at is, as you can see, from End to Tail in 27th place. This is Weapons Manufacturing. Affinity, I'm not really sure how to describe this deck. It kind of has some weird KCI vibes, where you're pairing Weapons Manufacturing. This is a card that, if you've paid attention to the videos that I've uploaded over the past couple of weeks, you might understand my obsession with this card. Whenever a non-token artifact enters, you make a munitions. When the munitions dies, it deals 2 damage. So you want to pair that with sacrifice outlets. Most importantly, Arcbound Ravager. Arcbound Ravager is a way for you to sacrifice just as many artifacts as you possibly need to, sort of at will. But the other cool thing is we also have Krark Clan Shaman, which lets you sack an artifact to deal 1 damage to each creature without flying. Yes, that includes itself. So you can actually just sort of wipe a board. You want to make sure that you're holding priority, because if you sacrifice an artifact to deal 1 to everything, this will kill itself. So you need to make sure that you do the hold priority. But you have stuff like Ichor Wellspring and Chromatic Star, which draws you cards when they die, pairing with the sack outlets. And then you kind of have this weird OTK setup with a sack outlet combined with Biotech Specialist and weapons. So Biotech, whenever you sack an artifact, it deals 2 damage to target opponent. And then the weapons, when those die, they also deal 2 damage. So very easy to set up an OTK effectively out of nowhere. Take a look at the sideboard real quick, but Greater Garganon in the sideboard too. It doesn't get any better than that. So shout out to End to Tail, and I may have to give this one a spin myself. The next deck I want to take a look at is from Dragon Fodder in 32nd place. So this is an Aboran Oculus deck, but maybe not an Oculus deck that you're used to. You have a bunch of ways to fill up the graveyard. Those include Stitcher's Supplier, when it enters or dies, mill 3. Otherworldly Gaze, which is simply just 1 mana Surveil 3. And you have some Surveil lands too. You have some Undercity Sewers and fetch lands. So those are your kind of more traditional ways to fill up the graveyard. Couple of Tainted Indulgence, draw 2, discard 1. And then you're pairing that with things like Village Rites and Corrupted Conviction, which are both sack a creature, draw 2 cards. So you can pair that with the Supplier to kind of set up some more turbo mills. And then you also have this Oculus package where you can mill over a bunch of cards, cast an Oculus, do so on and so forth. But you also have Archon of Cruelty and Persist. So if you mill over an Archon, you can then persist it from the graveyard to the battlefield for the low cost of 2 mana. We also have some Flare of Malices, which pair very, very well with not only Stitcher's Supplier, but also Bloodghast, which you can get back from the graveyard for free. You can also pair Bloodghast with the draw 2s. That's pretty cool as well. And then you got some Psychic Frogs and Emperor of Bones. Frog, just a fantastic card. Emperor of Bones works very well with Archon of Cruelty. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, interesting looking deck list. The other thing that I want to highlight is 4 copies of Spymaster's Vault. This says it enters the battlefield, tap unless you have a swamp, and then you can pay a B and tap it to have target creature you control connive X, where X is the number of creatures that died this turn. So for example, if you alt cast a Flare, your creature dies because you're sacrificing it as part of the cost, then their creature dies because they sacrifice a creature, and then you can connive for 2, and you spent no mana to make 2 things die. Also works with Conviction, sack a creature, then have connive 1. So a lot of cool things you can do. Here is the sideboard, and really sweet looking list here from Dragon Fodder. This next deck is so good that we couldn't even put it all on the screen at once. So Trauma Time's here in 26th place. This one is, I guess you could call it a Cascade deck of sorts. So there's 6 Cascade spells, and as typically you will see in decks that feature Cascade spells, there is only one card that they can cascade into, and that is not Living End, Glimpse of Tomorrow. So this one says shuffle all permanents you own into your library, reveal that many cards from the top of your library. You get all non-aura permanent cards onto the battlefield, then do the same for auras, so on and so forth. So basically, you shuffle all of your permanents away, you randomly flip that many cards from the top of your deck, and then you put those permanents into play. So the big thing that you're looking to hit is either Omnath or Risen Reef. Because if you say, for example, you glimpse for, 6 or 7, and you put an Omnath and a bunch of lands into play, they all enter at the same time, so your Omnath will trigger off of all of the lands that are entering into play off of the glimpse. So you make a bunch of mana that way. You can also hit an Elish Nord and then double up all of your triggers, which is kind of funny, especially doubling up the Risen Reef triggers. And then eventually you just kind of keep going. Sometimes what you can do is you can actually cascade into a glimpse. And then if you have enough mana, because you hit lands presumably off of the glimpse, you can just go again. And then if you hit an endurance, you can shuffle your glimpses back in. And then guess what? You can go again. So you basically just keep going and like an infinite number of times. You essentially kill them with Omnath, because you can keep choosing to keep the new Omnath to then deal them the 4 damage. We got a Loot here. Loot's got haste. You can activate that after you put it into play off a glimpse before the next glimpse resolves. So really cool looking list here from Trauma Times. Take a look at the sideboard. Again, you have to be careful with the sideboard because you do need to make sure you can abide by your Cascade restriction, unless, of course, you're playing against Tron, and then you just beat them with their own Ulamog. And the last Modern deck I want to take a look at here is from Goburn. This list actually won a challenge, first place here from Goburn. This is the Gruul Eldrazi list that won, and the reason I wanted to highlight it is, well, it is playing for Harrogast, and I do really prefer the Harrogast builds of Eldrazi to the non-Harrogast builds. But the new card on the block here, Ice-Till Explorer. It's a little weird to see this card not in a deck that has 4 Ghost Quarter and Field of Ruins and all this kind of stuff. really, you're not synergizing with the Ice Till too much. I mean, there are 2 copies of Ghost Quarter, but the really cool thing that Ice Till allows you to do in this deck is replay Sanctum of Ugin, right? Normally, the decks that feature Haragast need to play 2, sometimes 3 copies of Sanctum to be able to consistently find their Haragast. But if you Myco spawn for a Sanctum, what you can actually do is you sacrifice the Sanctum, go find your Emrakul, and then if you absolutely have to, you can replay the Sanctum from the graveyard with Ice Till. It also, when you're playing fetch lands, you're turbo milling, maybe you can mill over the Sanctum and then play it from the graveyard that way. So it gives you a little bit more access to the Sanctum, which I find pretty interesting. And it also can mill over Kozilek's Return, which is pretty big as well. So take a look at the sideboard there, and yeah, Go Burn wins the challenge with Ice Eldrazi. May have to give this one a try. And now that we have taken a look at Modern, let us switch things over to Pioneer, because people still play this format, and it's great. If you guys haven't checked out some uploads over the past week, if you maybe missed a couple, I uploaded some Pioneer videos. One, I believe, was last night, depending on when you're watching this, that would be Monday, and then I think Thursday of last week as well. So be sure to go check out those Pioneer videos. I had an absolute blast playing Pioneer, and I think there's a good chance I'm probably going to try to play some more. And this is why the format looks pretty good. Now, in terms of the number of decks that are viable, maybe it's a little bit less than Modern, but these numbers still don't look too bad, where Mono Red Mice continues to be on the decline. It was 21 last week, now it's 19.4, or I guess 22 last week. But a far cry from the 30+% that we saw about a month ago. Mono Black mid-range down a little bit. Is it Phoenix up slightly, maybe a percent, 1.2%. Rakdos Demons up a couple of percentage points. Azorius Control took a pretty big dip here from 6.9 to 1.9. So that is a significant downcrease. Orzhov Monument hanging out about the same. Boros Hammer 3.8 to 1.3. Then you go Celestia Angels, slight uptick. I'm still surprised that there aren't Angels is not sort of in that like top 3 or 4 contention or amount like number of decks played, just because I got to imagine it's got to be good against Mice, and historically it's been okay against Phoenix as well. But past that, nothing too crazy. Is it Prowess? Some more people picking up that compared to Phoenix, 4.4%, really non-existent last week. Boros Convoke 3.8. A lot of those lists do feature 4 copies of Cosmogran Zenith, so we showed that a couple of weeks prior, so keep that in mind if you're looking to play Convoke. Might be a good time to try Zenith out. And yeah, that's pretty much it. In terms of, metagame shifting, this looks pretty good. Decrease in Hammer and Azorius, small uptick in Rakdos, small uptick in Phoenix, small uptick in Angels, but yeah, this looks like you would expect it. So with the Pioneer metagame, let's go ahead and see if we can find some deck lists. And the first one that I want to show you guys is from Bachi Pandi 21, who 27th place, not 21st place. If you guys remember this deck from Standard, let me know in the comment section down below, because I have a fondness for any deck featuring 4 copies of Favorite Hoplite. This is Heroic. And when I mean Heroic, it really is heroic. There's a heroic card in here. It's not fake heroic where it's like, oh, I'm going to play a bunch of cards that target my creatures and play some prowess creatures. This has the OG. I'm a little sad to not see Battlewise Hoplite as well, but those have mostly been replaced by... This effectively has heroic, even though it doesn't say it on it, Illuminator Virtuoso. But the idea here is you're playing creatures that benefit you whenever you cast cheap spells or target them. These 3 all benefit from targeting. This one draws a card, this one connives, this one gets a counter, and this card has prowess, but it's only a 1-mana 1/1. You're pairing that with a bunch of cheap spells that target and or draw cards. Defiant Strike, 1 mana +1/+0, draw a card. Shore Up, 1 mana protection spell, which also untaps. You 4 Shore Up and 4 Slip Out, so you have a ton of protection spells. This one phases a creature out. We have Homestead Courage. Doesn't draw a card, but it has flashback for only a single mana. So for 2 mana, you get 2 separate instances of targeting, which is big. Honor, which is new card from EOE. 1 mana, put a counter, draw a card. Make something unblockable, draw a card. And then Sheltered by Ghosts. So you kind of get the concept where you just play a cheap thing, target it a couple of times, and then have a pile of protection spells to be able to, in the face of your opponent having a fatal push. So really clean looking deck list here. Here's the sideboard, some Scout for Survivors, more Drakes, more threats, some counter spells. But yeah, I don't know. I love heroic decks, and just decks like this in general, I am a very, very big fan of, so I may have to give this one a try. Next up from Hoshi Ina in 12th place, this is Mono Green Devotion, but maybe not the Mono Green Devotion that you're used to. So ever since the banning of Karn the Great Creator in Pioneer, these Mono Green decks they've had to try and find some sort of new win condition. Right, some people have tried the Haster for 4 mana that I can't remember the name of, but you can transform it and give all your stuff haste. And Hoshi Ina has decided to just play some, I guess the Crater Hoof is sort of the win condition once you're going through, but there's no Kioras, there's no Cavalier of Thorn, so we're not necessarily trying to just go through our entire deck in one turn. We're just trying to play some big stuff, right? So we have, it's interesting also, very interesting, I didn't even notice this, that we have decided to play Grazer and Atlanta War Elf instead of just playing 4 Elf and 4 Elvish Mystic. Very, very different take on the matter. We got some Ixalons to help find more permanents. And then the highlight here is 4 copies of Gruff Triplets, which is 6 mana 3/3 trample. When it enters the battlefield, if it isn't a token, you make 2 tokens that are copies of it. And the important thing about the copies is they maintain the mana cost, which means that all of the triplets alone will provide 9 devotion worth of green, which lets you really pop off on the next turn with Nykthos, playing 4 Citadel as well to even go faster with Nykthos, because Citadel can tap for 2 mana to activate the Nykthos, 4 Garenbrig as well, so basically just as many 2 mana lands as we can possibly get our hands on. Some Archdruid's Charms to help search for Nykthos, and just some assorted stuff up the curve like Vorinclex, Bloomvine, Ouroboros, Tyvar the Pummeler. And take a look at the sideboard here. So there you go. But yeah, if you're interested in playing Devotion and you're still not really sure what to do after the Karn ban, this might be a good place to start. The man, the myth, the legend himself, Crusherbot BG in 25th place. And I gotta tell you, looking at a deck list with 4 copies of Hardened Scales, maybe not good for my mental sanity, but Hardened Scales is the deck list that we are looking at here. We saw a very similar looking list last week that was playing Hardened Scales and Tezzeret, but it didn't really have this artifact focused, not quite as artifact focused. If I recall correctly, I don't believe that deck had either Metallic Mimic or Patchwork Automaton. But we're trying out these here. So Mimic lets you choose a creature type when it comes into play, and then each other creature you control of the chosen type enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So we're going to choose Construct, surprise, and we have Hangerback Walker, Marketback Walker, Patchwork Automaton, and Brightglass Gearhulk, all constructs. So all of those will enter with extra counters, which would be more extra counters if you had a Hardened Scales. Patchwork Automaton, very, very good when paired with cheap artifacts and Hardened Scales. This gets a counter whenever you cast an artifact. So whenever you cast your removal spell or your mana accelerant, then you get additional counters on the Patchwork. And then, as I mentioned, the Brightglass Gearhulks can tutor for removal spells or mana accelerants or life gain or the Haywire Might or any of the walkers, because these count as 0 in your deck list. Or when they're in your deck, not your deck list. And then some Tezzerets, because we're playing a bunch of artifacts anyways. Tezzeret pairs very well, especially with stuff like Hangerback, if you can sacrifice it to something like Duskrose. So a lot of synergistic pieces going around here. Very, very heavy on the artifact theme, and looks pretty good. There's the sideboard just for posterity's sake. And if you're into Hardened Scales as much as I am, this might be a good place to start. And no, I promise you, this is not a standard jump scare. MJ23, 16th place. If you took a look at a standard deck list prior to the banning of Hopeless Nightmare and This Town Ain't Big Enough, this might be exactly what the deck looked like, sans the 2 copies of Seam Rips. And I guess the Zeniths as well. But this is basically what the standard deck looked like, and this is now a Pioneer deck, and I think a very good Pioneer deck at that. You still have all the same pieces: Nurturing Pixie, Hopeless Nightmare, Storm Chaser's Talent, the bounce spells like this town, and just looks fantastic. And I think Cosmogran Zenith is a huge upgrade. Part of the reason why Zenith doesn't work as well in Standard is because you don't have that high enough density of 1-mana enchantments. I understand you can play Tiny Bones over Hopeless Nightmare, but it's just not the same. And when you're playing with 4 copies of Hopeless Nightmare and all of these 1-drops, makes a lot of sense to play Zenith. So, yeah, I mean, not a lot else to say about this. It sort of looks like how you would expect a Pixie deck to look like, plus, Thoughtseize. And yeah, MJ23, we might see that name pop up in a little bit, so stay tuned for that. And now that we've looked at Pioneer, we only have one format left to take a look at, and that is Mono Red, the format? No. It's Standard, and yeah, this is interesting. So, I mean, I was talking about the metagame diversity for Modern, and then the metagame diversity for Pioneer. That doesn't exist in Standard. There's 3 decks. And, this is certainly a direct result of how broken Cauldron is, where everybody realized Cauldron was the best deck. Then everybody realized the only deck that has a chance at beating Cauldron is Mono Red. That's why you see Mono Red at 34%. And, you could argue, oh, well, now Cauldron is not the most played deck. Maybe there's not an issue or something like that. But when 3 decks, let me do some math here, 37... it's like 70. When 3 decks hold up 72% of the format, something has gone awry at this point. And I think this is all specifically just due to the fact that Cauldron is so broken. The only deck that even comes close to having a chance against it is Mono Red. And this is where we are. Those are the 3 decks. Azorius Control up a little bit. The one thing that I will mention is Mono Green Aggro. We're going to take a look at one of those deck lists, but up a considerable amount. There wasn't really a ton of it last week, and it jumped to 5.2%. So it was the 4th most played deck, which is kind of funny. But yeah, this is the metagame. This is where we're going to be probably until November, unless they decide to do anything emergency. Depending on when this goes up, my VV ban video may or may not already be up, so be sure to check out that. If it's not already up, it'll be out soon. But with all of that, let's take a look and see if we can find some spice. And the first deck I have for you is from Ginkgo HS in 13th place with some Insidious Roots. Insidious Roots, very, very powerful enchantment. Whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, you get an 0/1 plant, then you get a counter on each plant you control. So very powerful with cards that allow you to pick things up out of the graveyard. Dredger's Insight, Overlord of the Baelmerk, Scavenging Ooze exiles cards, Molt Tender exiles cards, Cash Grab picks up cards, Agatha's Soul Cauldron. You get the idea. A lot of ways to pick up cards from your graveyard to trigger the roots. The thing that I wanted to highlight about this particular deck list compared to previous ones is we've added a lot more colors. So we've splashed red for Terra Magical Adept, another card that allows you to, you guessed it, take cards out of your graveyard. Although this one only gets enchantments. So the only enchantment that would actually trigger roots is the Overlord of the Baelmerk. But the nice thing about Terra is you can find roots itself. Because the Insidious Roots deck is extremely powerful when it has roots in play, but when it doesn't have roots, it doesn't do a whole lot. So Terra gives you more ways to find the roots. And then we're also splashing for Seamrip, which is an enchantment that you can hit off of Terra that is a fantastic removal spell because it kills Agatha's Soul Cauldron and Proph's Eidetic Memory. And there's not a lot of cards that do that. You have some disenchants, but I mean, this is 5 mana for a disenchant, so good luck with that. But yeah, that is sort of what we are looking at here. There's some weird one-ofs here. So Woodland Acolyte, which is a creature, when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. You're probably not going to be casting this for the creature half most often. Mend the Wilds, 1 mana instant, put a permanent from your graveyard on top of your library. So that not only triggers Insidious Roots, but that is another way for you to find roots from the graveyard and then put it on top of your deck. And the cool thing about Acolyte is you can get it back with Baelmerk. So even if you mill over the Acolyte, Baelmerk indirectly can then set up the Acolyte, which can then set up the roots. So some cool stuff going on there. There's the sideboard. There's also some Enduring Courage, which I believe is just here. Like once you start really popping off with roots, you can just kind of kill them in one shot with the Courage. So yeah, there's that as well. But very, very nice looking deck list here from Ginkgo. And I did mention we had not seen the last of MJ_23, and they're back here in Standard with a 9th place finish. This deck list, I like the look of this deck list so much, and I had seen it floating around a little bit, that I decided to bring this to my store championships, and I actually took it down, and I won, didn't drop a game with this lovely looking deck list. I had some really weird matchups. I played against mono red, mono green, but this deck felt pretty good, and I like it a little bit more than Esper Pixie, as given the fact that it's only 2 colors, so you don't get mana screwed as often. And I was very, very impressed with Elegy Acolyte. This card felt fantastic. Now, you might think to yourself, 4 is a lot of copies of that, but they actually just get better in multiples because you're drawing more cards and you're making more robots, and you have a ton of ways to get Void even outside of combat. You have the Pixies and the Kirans, which those will trigger Void by them just picking up a permanent, but then also all of your removal spells, which you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 11, 15 removal spells. And on top of that, even if you already have a breaker in play, you can just sacrifice the breaker. So almost more than half of your deck will trigger the Acolyte and just continuously make 2/2s over and over again. Acolyte into Elspeth, you get to make 2 robots a turn. I did that a couple of times, and that was pretty sick. And then the Zeniths to pair with all the Pixies and the 1-mana enchantments. Just a clean looking deck list. Here's the sideboard for posterity's sake. And yeah, I think if I'm going to keep playing Pixie in this format, I think I'm going to be playing this deck list. Next up here from Vitor Carvalho 01 in 29th place. This is, I don't know what to call this. There's no hardened scales, so I guess we can't really call it scales. But it is a deck list that is built around +1/+1 counters. So it's like scaleless scales. Let me know in the comments what you would call this deck. So the idea is you have a bunch of cards that have counters, right? District Mascot enters with a counter. Chocobo, whenever you play a land, you get a counter. Bill, Landfall, get a counter. Diadrine enters with counters. And then Ouroboros and Elspeth also put counters. And Collector's Cage. So you have a million different ways to put counters, and the big synergy here is you're pairing all those cards with Cori-steel, which is a 3/3 for 3. It says your opponents can't cast spells during your turn, but the important line of text is whenever one or more creatures you control with power greater than its base power deal damage to a player, draw a card. So every single creature you have that has a counter on it will trigger the Cori-steel, which is pretty cool. And the weird thing about Cage in this deck list is you don't actually have a ton of big hits. You have the Ouroboros and the Elspeths, but no Overlords, none of that stuff. So that's why there's only 2 cages, so I understand that. And then you need to make room for... Think about it this way, right? If the Celestia mana is bad enough, why not just play some Fable Passages, which you may have wanted to do anyways, and now you've kind of talked yourself into playing Bill and Chocobo. So the mana's bad enough. Might as well try it out. But yeah, no, I like the look of this deck list. We'll show the sideboard here for posterity's sake. We got the Overlords in the sideboard. But I do like the look of this deck list, and I may have to give this one a try myself. And last, but certainly not least, from Elvin7 in 2nd place, so almost took down the challenge. This is the mono green deck I was telling you guys about. And there's been a lot of this popping up recently. It's what you would probably expect a mono green deck to look like, just super clean, a bunch of 4-ofs, Mites, Elves, Paw Patches, Frenzied Baloths, Keen-Eyed Curators, Ouroboros, Innkeeper's Talents, some pump spells and protection like Giant Growth, Tifa's Limit Break, Royal Treatment, couple of Surocs, couple of Sentinels, 20 lands, clean, just lovely, beautiful looking deck list. Nothing really fancy going on here. Just the best green cards at each spot in the curve. I love the main deck Surocs. Fantastic card against Dimir. Every single time they target your creatures, you draw a card. Paw Patch, also an amazing card against Dimir. So believe it or not, for a mono green creature deck, I feel like this has got to have a good Dimir matchup. Take a look at the sideboard here. Some Torpor Orbs, a couple of Railway Brawlers. When you really want to go big, some additional kill spells and disenchants. So yeah, I mean, this deck has been putting up a lot of numbers on Magic Online, and I think I know why. And that, my friends, is going to do it for another episode of Watching the Meta. I hope you guys enjoyed all of these little upgrades that we've been doing to the deck viewer. And if you guys have any suggestions for what you want to make, any improvements we can make on the series, please be sure to let me know in the comment section down below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and until next week, adios.